Hey there, and welcome to Ask Daniel number 41. I have an announcement that I want to start with, actually, but first I want to move this so we can see it. Now, that said, first thing I actually want to share with you is that tomorrow is in all likelihood going to be the last Insomnia Insight episode. And that doesn't mean, I'm going to stop this channel. Of course not. Absolutely not. But as some of you know, I've started this project with a friend, colleague of mine, Michael Schwartz, called the Sleep Coach School. And what happened was we started to do a YouTube/podcast, and we started moving into talking about kind of the same topics as here. And turns out that I was thinking about maybe taking some questions from this channel, moving it to that podcast, etc. And then I just realized, actually, it was my wife who said, this is too much. You're doing the same thing on two channels. It doesn't work. So I thought long and hard about it, and I'm going to move everything under the Sleep Coach School. So if you see this channel changing names tomorrow, that's why, but nothing's going to change. There's still going to be Ask Daniel episodes. There's still going to be, instead of Insomnia Insights, I think I'm going to call them Sleep Insight episodes. And instead of Talking Insomnia, I'm going to call those episodes Talking Sleep. I'm moving away from, and one thing that I regret kind of with this channel is that I called it Insomnia Insight, when, that's the focus on the problem instead of focus on the goal, etc. So that's coming up tomorrow. It's probably going to be the last ever Insomnia Insight episode, and it's going to be an important one. I'm going to talk about what the problem with CBTI is as it's currently done, if you will. But that said, let's move on to today's episode, and we're going to start with something that I found really, really encouraging, and this is a comment on Ask Daniel number 40 from ZBZI. I'm just saying Z here, and she wrote the following yesterday. Hi Daniel, I saw your response to my comment on the day you posted, and can I just say that it was pure gold. I did exactly what you suggested. Went to bed telling myself that it's not a big deal if I don't sleep at all or have hypnic jerks, as it's happened before and it will probably happen again. And for the last 4 days, I've been sleeping really well. I agree with you. Sleep restriction, spending less time in bed, it's probably good at the beginning, but on the long run, it doesn't really matter that much. It seems that what really helps is changing my attitude, not being afraid of insomnia, but rather being ready to face some sleeplessness. I haven't replied earlier because after the first night, I wanted to see if it was a trend, and it seems so. Thank you. I really appreciate your help. I might be quiet for a while because I've noticed the more I think about insomnia, the bigger a problem it becomes, but I'll definitely stay in touch. I was super, super happy to hear this. I don't expect Z to be tuning in here, as I think she's made a wise decision to kind of tune out, leave the sleep world for a little bit, but we hope to hear from her in the future, and hopefully she'll share more of these really inspiring comments. And I just want to point out, what is always the case when you hear somebody, going towards a place where they're sleeping well is just like, exactly this type of comment. I went to bed telling myself it doesn't really matter if I sleep so much or not. And she also says, what really helped me was changing my attitude, not being afraid of insomnia, but rather being ready, being willing to face some sleeplessness. That is the goal for many of you tuning in here. You may think, how can I decide, or how can I think I don't need to worry about not sleeping? Well, I completely understand that. In the beginning, it's a process. You have to do a lot of learning, unlearning, changing habits, etc. But the goal is definitely to reach a point where you think in the lines of Z here. So Z, thanks so much for sharing that, and we can start here on a positive note. And with that said, I want to move on to, hi Lidl, nice seeing you here. Move on to a comment, or a question rather, that I got a few days ago, and I'm very sorry that I forgot to answer this one. This is from Lewis, and it actually came in on April 27th, and he wrote the following. Just seeing your YouTube videos, and it's put me at ease with my sleeping problem. I have a question though. Can having a disrupted routine cause sleeping problems? Since this lockdown, I've had poor sleep causing anxiety and overthinking. I've had a history of anxiety, but when I'm working all week, I seem to switch off better at night. I now have had a rough few nights from only getting 3 to 4 hours at night. I had one night of no sleep as I kept getting body jolts as I tried to drift off, which made me feel more anxious. So I replied that I was going to actually reply in last episode, and I forgot that. Very sorry about Lewis. But then Lewis also said, I managed to fall into deep sleep last night, from which I think I must have been completely exhausted, my brain and body out. So here is the thing. We've seen a number of questions just like this, Lewis, in the past few weeks, very similar. Like the lockdown, I think definitely affects people's sleep in two ways. One is if there's anything that makes you more anxious, that makes you sleep less. That is completely expected, and having sleeplessness as a result of anxiety is completely normal. If somebody said, I lost my job and now I sleep great, that's weird, right? So it's always important to know that when there is some type of anxiety going on that's causing you to sleep less, that's actually normal, and that helps you not react to it, normalize it, and say when this circumstance that's causing my anxiety, when that subsides, when it goes back to normal, I'm going to sleep better too, and this is normal. That is super important, not to go into that rabbit hole of like really thinking, why is this happening, what can I do, etc. Number one. Number two, the lockdown has this effect of like, we have more time on our hands, which some people say that's great, now I can sleep more, but oftentimes the opposite happens. When you have more time, you tend to maybe go to bed a little earlier, you kind of have more time, so you in fact want to sleep more, you may try to sleep in, etc. And we know that the more time you spend in bed, the more you're trying to sleep, the more likelihood that you get insomnia. So definitely for those two reasons, I think it's very likely that the circumstance that we're in now with the lockdown, with COVID, etc., produces a lot of anxiety, insomnia rather. But it was one thing I wanted to comment on here. It says, since the lockdown, I've had poor sleep causing anxiety and overthinking. Maybe it is the other way around. Maybe it is, the circumstance, the thing that we can't control is that there's this lockdown, COVID, etc. going on, and then you're starting to think in lines of like, what's going on? There's something dangerous going on, etc. And that produces anxiety. Meaning, maybe it's the other way around. Meaning, it's my thinking, my overthinking causes anxiety, which causes sleeplessness, rather than the other way around. I think it's more likely. Some people might say you're splitting hairs, but I think that's important, because if you think that, let's say, if you think it's the anxiety that's causing the circumstance of sleeplessness, etc., then it's kind of disempowering. If you consider that actually it is my reaction to what's happening in the world that is causing me to sleep less, that makes you more empowered, because you can work more on your thought, etc. But I think I'm doing a little bit overkill here. I think the most important point here is, of course, absolutely, these circumstances can cause anxiety, through your thoughts. They cause anxiety, and because of that anxiety, the hyperarousal, you can have these jolts, absolutely. So that is completely expected, and I think that is the key thing here is, yes, circumstances can cause this, that is expected, and once things go back to much normal, I expect you to sleep really, really, really well. Louis, sorry for the late reply, and any follow-up question, please let me know. All right. So with that said, Lydell is commenting live here. The lockdown also messes me too. Totally. I believe, if I'm correct, that you're in the Philippines, where I hear it's really, really strict, like literally like patrolling the streets, and you can't go outside unless you have like a slip, like a law, etc., which I can see that causes a lot of anxiety, insomnia, stress, etc. Okay, so with that said, we are going to go to India, meaning we have a question from New Delhi, India. And this is, as I'm reading this, it's kind of a long email, but I think it can teach us a lot. So we're going to really read this email and then apply our 3P model, which explains how insomnia happens, and then go from there. So let's read this together. Hey, Daniel. I'm Alakh. I'm getting 22. I'm going to be 22 years old in August. I'm from New Delhi, India. I think I'm suffering from a bit modified form of orthosomnia and really need help. Orthosomnia, by the way, is when somebody's trying to kind of perfect their sleep, and that produces a lot of insomnia. It all started in year 2017. I used to be a great, cheerful guy with good sleeping patterns. I used to get ample amount of sleep, almost 8 hours. Getting sleep within seconds with 20, 30 minutes power naps in the afternoon. And I used to have an exhausting day in school and also was active in sports. After completing my high school, I took a year off to prepare for an entrance examination for getting into a medical school in India, and used to spend my maximum time studying the whole day. By the way, those infamous entrance exams, I am very well aware of them. Somewhere in July 2017, I noticed changes in my sleep pattern. It started taking time for me to get to sleep from 1 hour in the beginning to 3 to 4 hours later on, although I went to bed at the same time daily. And my sleep started decreasing. Well, I was not really concerned about my sleep pattern at the beginning until I found out that I was not able to focus on my studies, and successively my grades, mock tests, starting to deteriorate. Later on, after following some internet articles, I found out that it may be due to sleep deprivation. So I began to focus on my sleep and try to stay in bed for a longer time just to get more amount of sleep. And also used to play badminton with my siblings because I thought that if I got exhausted in the day, I would get to sleep earlier. Sadly, it never happened. My health, my grades, and my sleeping pattern all went down progressively to the extent that I thought I was going to lose it all. But I don't know what happened. However, I managed to study in spite of deteriorating my sleep, and used to get sleep merely 3 to 4 hours, being in bed for as much as 10 hours. Last year, 2019, I got admitted to India's second best medical school. It took me 2 years to crack the exam, and the main reason was due to my sleep deprivation, due to which I devoted most of my time improving my sleep, and finally I began with my studies. But since day one, July 2017, I can't go to bed without getting afraid that it will happen. What will happen if I don't get enough sleep? Will my body stop to respond as it did early? And what if my brain learning capacity decreases? And what if I die of sleep deprivation? And what else bad could happen if I'm not able to get sleep today peacefully? These type of thoughts are always racing in my brain daily, and intensifies just before going to bed. And these are the only thoughts due to which I'm not able to sleep the whole night. Now, during lockdown in my country, I'm helpless because these thoughts have increased exponentially. Yesterday, I was able to sleep till 7 in the morning. I wasn't able to sleep until 7 in the morning. I went to bed at 11:30 p.m. I was just laying there thinking about sleep and all those thoughts. This is not only about yesterday. I'm experiencing these thoughts for a long time. I think I cannot sustain this more because now my family is getting annoyed, and I think I'm getting depressed day by day. Please suggest me a way to get out of it. Well, Alakh, this is one of those emails where you just feel how great of an impact the lack of sleep, the loss of sleep, the insomnia is having, for sure. I hear that. I'm really sorry that this has happened, but I'm glad you found this channel. And now let's really try to figure out what's going on here. So we're going to apply our 3P model, which is so helpful in understanding why insomnia happens. There are 3 Ps involved. There is predisposing factors, there are precipitating factors, and then there are perpetuating factors. And we'll see that the third P, the perpetuating factors, that's the key. That's the most important thing. Once you understand that one, you will understand how you get back to sleeping really, really well again. Now, starting with that, those predisposing factors, what's that? Well, those are traits. We are all different in terms of our personalities. Some of us humans are more likely than others to have trouble sleeping at some point in our lives. And those traits are having a tendency to worry, being health conscious, being a type A personality, a high achiever, and being somewhat of an overthinker. And although Alakh has not talked about this specifically, we can tell one thing about Alakh. And that is Alakh is a high achiever for sure. Alakh got into the second best medical school in India. Alakh is somebody who works really hard and is probably also health conscious. We hear that Alakh did a lot of exercise and still, trying to play badminton, etc. So we can we understand here that Alakh has this personality that predisposes towards insomnia. By the way, those traits, like being a high achiever, being somebody who thinks real hard about stuff, being kind of a perfectionist, etc., those are generally speaking good traits in life in general. That helps you get ahead. Those traits are why you, Alakh, got into medical school. Those are good traits. But when it comes to sleep, the sleep world is upside down. In the sleep world, hard work is punished with insomnia, and being lazy, doing nothing, is rewarded with good sleep. That is the problem for someone who has those traits. But that said, There are millions of people in the world that have these traits and sleep amazingly well. That's our first P. And the reason it's important to bring up is just for understanding, to demystify, to see, okay, I see why I started having trouble sleeping. That's the first P. Second P, precipitating factor, something that triggers that initial bout of sleeplessness. In this case, we have it black and white here. It was the preparing for this entrance exam that was so stressful, and that it consumed so much, so much, I'm sure, time, energy, etc. But also there was this I'm sure there was this fear. What if I don't get in? What if I fail? And then we mix in sleep with that. Then you start sleeping worse, and then that increases the anxiety over it. But my point here is that it is normal and expected. It's not strange at all that someone has trouble sleeping when there has this kind of looming thing that's happening to them. So that precipitating factor, we know what it is. It's not strange that it causes sleeplessness, but what happens next, that is where it's really, really important. These are the perpetuating factors. So that what's happening is you have certain traits, something happens, but that's all normal, until your brain starts saying, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping. Or rather, you're not sleeping. There's a problem here. And the brain starts honing in on the lack of sleep as a problem, as a threat, as something you got to do something about. And we see here, I read from Alakh that he went to bed the same time every night. That's a classic thing that you try to do to preserve sleep. I'm going to go to bed the same time every night. And actually didn't read so much about other sleep efforts, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if I hear, Alakh, that you may have tried supplements and teas, maybe you've tried medications, maybe you tried soothing music, etc. That is when the problem begins, when somebody's I can't sleep, I'm going to go to bed at the same time, I'm going to try to find out what's going on, I'm going to try all these things. And then what happens is, as you cannot force sleep, it seems like nothing is working. No matter what the brain does, you're not sleeping anymore. The brain goes oh my gosh, this is a bigger problem than I thought. You got to try to fight it more. Nothing's helping. You got to fight it more. And then you kind of spiral out of control, and you have this complete lack of sleep, insomnia, whatever you want to call it. Now, I think as you can see from this, the key to going back to sleeping well again is to train your brain that sleeplessness is actually not a real threat. It's not a tiger coming at you. It's not a bear charging at you. It's just your brain has just honed in on a perceived threat. Guess what? You've had very, very, a lot of trouble sleeping for 2-3 years now, and you can still write a completely coherent email. You get into the second best medical school in India despite all this happening, which shows you that you can achieve great things even on little sleep. And that's not me saying it's fine to sleep a little, that's you should just ignore it, but it shows you that you don't have as much to be afraid of as you think, and when you start going in that direction, training your brain, I have nothing to be afraid of. This is a perceived threat. You calm your brain down. That way sleep is going to come to you. Now, getting real practical here. I think the main thing for someone like you, Alakh, is understanding this, that there's nothing wrong inside of you. Nothing is broken. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is your thought pattern, your thoughts about sleep, your fear of losing sleep. That's what's happened. And you can go back to sleeping fantastic again. No question about that. Now, so education is the first thing, and the second thing is behavior change. And, and that's where spending less time in bed is so important, and it's not important to go to bed at the same time, but it's important to get up at the same time, deciding no matter what happens at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get out of bed. Even if you didn't sleep at all, you're going to get up at 7 o'clock. And then you're going to go to bed, not too early, maybe 11 p.m. or something like that, not before that. And just kind of do that over time. And you will find that sleep will start coming to your way. Not so much because you're spending less time in bed, but because the act of spending less time in bed is a product of you starting to understand that you shouldn't pursue sleep, trying to get it, worry about it, etc. So, Alakh, I think I hope this really helped. And I think you'll find a lot on this channel that will be helpful. And please stay in touch. Let us know how you do, and congrats on getting into that med school. By the way, that's amazing. Well done, and we'll go from there. Okay. Hope really this helped, Alakh. All right. So with that said, yeah, Lida said, the lockdown messes me up. What if I die from sleep deprivation? Yeah. I think Lydell, who's with us live here, is commenting on what Alakh just said. What if I die from sleep deprivation? Which is not possible at all, but it's a common thought that Lydell also had a lot. And oh, look at this. And Lydell says, ignoring that thought really changed my life, even if I still have trouble sleeping. So that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. 100%. Okay, and now, and a great question that I was looking forward to answering here from Navinder. Thank you, Navinder, for this question. Navinder wrote this 3 days ago. Hello, Daniel. I'm planning to attempt sleep restriction soon. My last exam is on the 18th of May, so I'll do it after that. Sleep restriction, by the way, is what I just talked about with Alakh, like spending less time in bed. There's just one question that keeps playing on my mind, though. I've watched a lot of your videos and I understand how sleep restriction helps us. It helps us gain sleep confidence, builds a sleep drive, and is a psychological step away from obsessing about sleep. Love it, because that's like literally my words, right? Exactly, psychological step away from obsessing about sleep, 100%. But there's just extra piece of information that I would like. Can you explain how sleep restriction or CBTI in general stops the amygdala from perceiving sleeplessness to be a threat? I have quite a scientific background, so I'm just yearning to understand insomnia on a slightly deeper level. I feel like if I know the answer, I would be much more confident in the CBTI program. I guess I just want some reassurance. Thank you for all your content, and I liked your book. Oh yeah, I remember that. I wrote a quick email to Navinder saying thanks for reading my book. I'm guessing that is the one that's not here right now. The Why We Don't Sleep. But cool. Yeah, this is a great question. So I think I want to go in this direction. If you are being attacked by a tiger, and you then think, okay, I'm gonna die, and that makes you super, super scared, and you decide to run and hide, and you survive. Well, that's all good. Something perfect has happened. You had the perfect response to a tiger, which was a real threat, right? Now, that said, though, if we use the tiger example again, now you ran away and you survived. That reinforces the thought that this could kill me, meaning like it is important to run away when I see a tiger. Perfect reaction and feedback loop and etc. like that. Now, when it comes to the lack of sleep, it is not a real threat. It's not a physical, tangible threat out there. So when the same thing happens, like your mind is like, oh my gosh, sleeplessness could kill me. You become really anxious, and your reaction becomes, I have to escape this, avoid this. And you try to like spend extra time in bed, go to bed early, try things. You're again reinforcing this threat picture here, where the lack of sleep is a threat. So the reason that, let's say specifically here, spending less time in bed is an important way of calming the amygdala down, is that you're doing exactly the opposite of what it wants you to do, and nothing happens. It would be like going back to the tiger. It would be like if you just said that the tiger, the real perceived threat, is coming at you, and you just stand there, and then the tiger actually didn't attack you, then you'd be like, oh, okay, kind of changes your thought there. Maybe tigers aren't that dangerous. And that calms you down, and the next time a tiger comes, you don't do anything, and you're not afraid of tigers anymore, which is not good. That's not good when it comes to a real threat like a tiger. But that is how it works for sleep. So when you're doing the opposite of what your amygdala wants you to do, your amygdala is saying like, you gotta get more sleep, you gotta spend more time in bed, you gotta try more things to sleep, and you do the opposite. Like, no, I'm gonna spend less time in bed. I'm not gonna read up on sleep. I'm not gonna try to force sleep. You're putting everything on its head. And when nothing happens, meaning you don't go insane, you have an okay day, you actually sleep pretty good, etc., then every time it happens, you're calming the amygdala down. It's like, oh, the amygdala's like, oh, it wasn't a real threat. Oh, nothing happened. Oh, I'm all right. I'm going to be okay. So and I hope that answered that question, Navinder. And I think something that I'm going to talk more and more about is that CBTI is almost be used synonymously with like sleep restriction, which I think is very unfortunate. And I'm understanding this more and more, spending less time that is important, but it is important because it is a result of you having understood that, I have to stop trying to sleep. A lot of people make the mistake of saying like, okay, kind of skip a lot of the educational part and be like, okay, I'm just going to spend less time in bed and that's going to make me sleep. That's not going to work. You've created a sleep effort, which is going to backfire. So just want to highlight that one. Okay, much more about that tomorrow, by the way. So Navinder, hope that helped, and stay in touch. Let us know how you do. And with that one answered, we are going to move to a question from Paul, who I know has submitted some questions before, at least one. Oh, this was the old one actually. This was from the April 9, and there was a fall question here. Dear Daniel, I've now done bedtime restriction on a 10 to 5 window. So that means Paul is getting up at 5, not going to bed before 10 for the last 2 weeks. As you may recall, my issue had been waking up early around 4 a.m. Despite following the program strictly, I'm still not noticing any real change in this habit, even if I end up going to bed later at about 11. Can you please let me know what you recommend? I'd also be grateful if you could explain the rationale for your recommendation, just so I understand the reasoning behind it. Okay, I get it. Again, the benefit of going through such a turbulent month has become much more relaxed about sleep and sleeplessness. But despite this, that 4 a.m. habit just doesn't seem to want to break. Okay, so firstly, I want to say I am very happy that you're more relaxed about sleep and sleeplessness. And as you may have heard me say, oftentimes there's this kind of like this 3 steps towards getting good sleep, which is first, being less worried. And a lot of people are like, I'm not so worried about sleep, but I'm not sleeping any better. When people tell me that, I'm like, that's good. I'm encouraged that reduction in hyperarousal is eventually going to lead to better sleep, number one. So yeah, I just want to point that one out. Right. Okay. Now you keep on waking up at 4 a.m. and when it comes to sleep, sleep is not complicated. If you are waking up and then not falling back asleep, that is either because your sleep drive is insufficient, you're just not sleeping enough, your body does not want to sleep, or it is because the waking up has caused you to become hyper aroused, you're like alerted, you're kind of reacting to waking up in a way that keeps you awake for longer than you would have if you would not have reacted like that. So with that said, what should you do? I think the one thing that comes to my mind immediately here is not knowing what time it is. It seems like you pretty much know that it's around 4 a.m. So not checking the time, I think, is really helpful, because almost always when one checks the time and you're kind of disappointed, it's like, oh, it's 4 a.m. again. It just reinforces that you have trouble sleeping. It's happening again. It makes you pay more attention to your sleep, and it's more likely that it becomes like a recurrent thing. So I think a great thing is like not checking the time, and just maybe have an alarm at 5. But if you wake up and your alarm has not gone off, then just be like, okay, I'm going to lay down in bed, and if it's comfortable, I can just think of something pleasant, and maybe I'll fall back asleep. Or if that doesn't come easy to you, then you can read a book or do something that is either enjoyable or at least neutral, like doing some dishes or whatever. And then when you feel sleepy, go back to sleep. I think that's really good for that type of like early morning awakening. And I think that's really good. And I also want to say 2 weeks is not a long time. For most people do start noticing some type of benefit when they've started implementing spending less time in bed and learning as well in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. But it can take longer. So I think another important thing is just like, just keep going. And I would say resist the urge to tweak the sleep window. I would say just keep sticking with it, keep going with it. And the rationale behind that is just like, I'll use my favorite analogy here, which is, let's say you have a goal, and that's to reach this destination of sleeping really, really well. And it's kind of like you're hiking towards that goal, right? And if you start if you kind of not getting there, and you kind of stumble, and you look at this route, you stumble over, and you kind of examine it, and why is it here, and what can I do to avoid it, etc., you're never going to reach your goal. So you can look at this like 4 a.m. awakenings as kind of a stumbling block, where you think like, why is this happening? What's going on? How can I change things, etc.? Then you get stuck there. So if you can just kind of keep hiking, keep going on, and maybe decide to, I'm going to reevaluate this in like 3 weeks or something, but just keep going. I think those are the things I'm really popping up in my mind when I read this. Paul, hope this helped, and stay in touch, and let me know if you have follow-up questions, Paul. So with that said, let's check in here. Oh, Navinder is here. Oh, cool, you're here live. Yeah. Anytime. I was happy you caught this live, and stay in touch. Yeah, awesome. So that was that one, and then we have just 2 more questions here, and the last one is from Alina, by the way. I think it's a really good one, so stay for that one. I think it's a really good one. Juro, though, has a question first. It's titled Sleep Anxiety Question. Hi, Daniel. Really appreciate your work. Thanks to your videos, I slept much better in the last month. Super happy to hear that. Super glad to hear that. But this week I experienced some sleep troubles, which are a bit different. I don't know whether it was a noon nap or the fact that I ate before going to bed, but that night I started paying a bit more attention to my sleep. So I had a problem to fall asleep for approximately 3 hours. The next day had the same, but I started developing anxiety. This is when I decided to stick to the same wake up, 6 a.m. no matter what. So it ended up with me sleeping approximately 3 to 4 hours. By the end of day 3, I felt really sleepy, but once I went to bed, I started feeling anxious. It's like I'm sleepy and worried at the same time. As soon as I start drifting off, my body responds with a wave of anxiety, and this can go on for hours. What helped me before was not forcing sleep and not going to bed until I'm sleepy, but now it's different. And now I feel so sleepy that it's hard to keep my eyes open. But once I'm about to fall asleep, I get strong anxiety. I think if I wouldn't feel sleepy, I would take it much better. But now my body sends me mixed signals. It gives me sleep drive at the same time, doesn't let me follow it. Do you have any advice on that? What could be the best reaction to this kind of state? Thanks so much. Well, thank you, Juro, for this question. It's a very good one, very insightful one. You have understood a lot. And I want to start, as always, with the positive here. I slept much better in the last month. That's fantastic. That is amazing. And that's like shows you that there's nothing wrong with your sleep system, nothing wrong with you. And you know this one, but just pointing out to everyone, it is, thoughts around sleep, reactions to sleeplessness. That is, what the roadblock is here. And so it's kind of this is also not an uncommon scenario, meaning someone has started listening to my channel or started some course or something like that, sleeping good for a couple of weeks, and then start sleeping worse again. And then it becomes frustrating when you're like, I'm doing the exact same things I was doing before, but now I have the different result. But in reality, it's the fact that you're kind of expecting to get the same result you did before by doing the same thing. That is, in a way, that's not in your favor, because expectations like, I'm doing this, why I'm not getting sleep. That is, again, you're paying more attention to your sleep than you were before. You have a kind of let's just put it that way. Like you're focusing more on the result now than you did last time, because now you're expecting to get a certain type of result. So I think I want to say this, that I don't know what the exact time frame here, but I think you're absolutely right. You have this gas and brake going at the same time. You're sleepy, but you're also kind of hyper aroused. You're wondering if you're going to sleep, what's going to happen, etc. And they're fighting each other, and that gives you no good sleep, just like fragmented in and out sleep. But I really think that the best thing to do is, if you feel that you still don't quite understand why you have trouble sleeping, then just listen to more here, explore the channel, and until you get to a point where you're like, okay, I totally get it. I understand how thoughts, reaction, habits are what's causing me sleeplessness. There's no mystery there. I understand it completely. And when you've gotten to that point, you just do what you're doing. You just say, I'm gonna get up at 6 no matter what. I'm not gonna go to bed too early. And other than that, I'm just gonna go towards the light, do things I enjoy, pay sleep no attention, shift, go in that direction, and be patient with that. Be patient with that, and sleep will come back your way, Juro. Absolutely, 100%. So hope this helped. And other questions, just send them again. And just one last point, which is this is such a common one. I feel sleepy in the evening, but as soon as my head hits the pillow, I wake up. That is probably the most common thing I hear that people find is really bizarre and strange. It is not strange at all. It's because you had trouble sleeping, and when you go to bed, you get like that association again, and that's not strange. So everything I said before will help with that as well as anything else. Cool. So with that said, let's see. Zoltan is back. Hey, Zoltan. Nice hearing you. Very, very good. And so let's move on to this one. I pondered this one a little bit, so I think I have quite a good idea of how we're going to answer Alina. So Alina wrote the following 3 hours ago. Hi, Daniel. I hope you're doing well, and congrats on your new app. Thank you. I was so excited this morning. I got this notification that it was up, but it was actually an old version. I had to immediately go into panic mode and take it down again. But anyway, soon the real one will be up. But anyway, I wanted to ask for your advice. I think I built my strategy in maintaining stable sleep, but just recently I experienced a setback. We went for a weekend to my husband's parents' house, and I found myself that I was not so sleepy. The problem was that I couldn't go to the other room and do something while waiting for that sleep drive to come back without waking up his parents. And I also didn't want to disturb my husband, so I kind of got trapped. I was lying and trying to shift my attention, but that wasn't easy. As time passed, I started feeling even irritated by the situation, which of course made me want to sleep less. So I was wondering, is there any good strategy when conditions don't allow you to choose behavior? I know you've been talking about shifting attention away from insomnia, but is it possible without physically doing something to switch your attention to other thoughts? And what does it take to do that? Cool. So I think of this as like a two-piece thing. Like there's kind of the initial scenario of like you're in your husband's parents' house and not sleeping that much. And then this other one, which is like, what do you do when you're kind of trapped like that? And so I want to use our model a little bit here. We haven't done so much of the model work here, but very briefly, for those of you who are new here, circumstances, things in the universe that we cannot control, like the past, things that are just reality. Let's call it reality. And thoughts are things we start thinking about, as a reaction to reality, if you will, thoughts. And those produce emotions. Emotions are the things that make us do stuff. And when you do something, you get a result, etc. That's the model. Now, the circumstance here, kind of the big picture circumstances here is like, imagine that, someone is spending time in their parents' place. They are in bed, but not really sleepy and can't go anywhere, right? That's the circumstance. And for someone who is, let's say, never had any trouble sleeping, they then start thinking in the lines of like, oh, here I am, and I can't sleep because I'm in my parents' place and I can't go anywhere, right? And that thought, it's just a reflection of reality, really. That's what they're thinking. And that makes them kind of like annoyed. And there's not actually much action there or reaction. They're kind of annoyed, but they're still mostly inaction, really. They kind of stay in bed. And the result becomes they sleep a little bit less, but it doesn't really affect them too much, probably. That's kind of like, let's say, a baseline reaction for someone who has not had any trouble sleeping in the circumstance that you described. Now, your circumstances are different. It's the same in a sense that you're in your parents, your husband's parents' place, and you're in bed but not sleepy. But your thoughts, but the difference though is that you've had trouble sleeping. So your thoughts become more kind of complex here, and you think more about this than somebody who never had trouble sleeping would have done. And that then causes it to be like, kind of like, oh my gosh, here I am. I don't have enough sleep drive, but I can't go anywhere. What's going on? What should I do? And then your emotions become like stronger. You have kind of more anxiety thoughts about this, and that results in a reaction. Actually, a reaction that is kind of preoccupation and maybe ruminating, etc. And then the result becomes you sleep less. Now, the important part here is that circumstances, what's happened in the past, actually have no power over you. The fact that you've had trouble sleeping in the past has no power over you. Your circumstances are actually the same as somebody who's never had trouble sleeping, but your thoughts are different, And that's, again, I'm always going to go back to that's what's empowering here, is that as long as you can change your thoughts about the circumstance, you're going to have the same result as somebody who's never had trouble sleeping, which is you're going to sleep less when you're in this kind of circumstance, but nothing else going to come of it, And so the first kind of big picture, like thing I want to say here is that it is completely expected in these circumstances to sleep less, and that's completely normal. And guess what? If you had trouble sleeping in the past, it's always expected that you may have a little bit of a stronger reaction. So sleeping less in the same circumstances as somebody who's never had trouble sleeping, that's also normal. So I just completely want to like normalize the sleeplessness that happened in these circumstances. And I could just end here and say, this is nothing to even talk more about because this is completely normal, and then leave it there. I think that may be actually the best thing, but I can't help myself. I have to talk about this other part too, which is this one. What if, so the second part of this question is like, what if you're kind of trapped, you're in bed and it's too early, actually, you're not sleepy enough, but you can't go anywhere, you can't pick up a book, you can't disturb anyone. Then those are the circumstances in this model. The circumstances are you're in bed and you're not sleepy and you can't go anywhere. Well, guess what? You can't change that. You can't change circumstances. If you argue with the reality, then you're always going to lose. So the thought has to actually be something in the lines of acceptance. When you're in bed, you're not sleepy, you can't go anywhere. You just have to actually apply an acceptance approach, because if you can't force sleep, there's no mind trick, there's nothing else you can do. You have to kind of be like, I have to accept that this is reality, and I'm probably not going to sleep that much tonight. And when you do that acceptance thing, when you kind of do have an acceptance thought, you become less stressed and you actually end up sleeping more than if you'd not accept reality. Finally, what can you do? You could theoretically maybe do some type of like mindfulness thing, like just observe your thoughts and something of that nature. But it's very tricky in this situation because intent is so important when you do mindfulness from a good place, because you want to do it or you enjoy it, something like that. It's perfect. But when you do it in circumstances where you're kind of trapped like that, it's almost given that it's going to become a sleep effort, like something you kind of try to do to sleep on, which always backfires. And so actually, final thing I want to say here, I always talk about shifting attention away from insomnia. When I say that, I mean more big picture, like in your life, not so much from that very instant when you're in bed and can't and you're not sleeping. So yeah, Alina, and by the way, yeah, I want to say, I said this a couple times, but I want to say, if you've been sleeping well until now and this happened, that is, I want to point this one out. You said, I just recently experienced a setback. Guess what? This is normal. This is just like this would happen to anyone, because you've had trouble sleeping. You think of it as a setback, but you don't need to. This is completely normal, expected. All right. So that said, we'll see if there's some live things here. Zoltan is here. I wish I could donate to your channel. Oh, that's so nice, Zoltan. You know what? I really appreciate that, and I will say that I have a book coming out. Anybody wants to buy that would be super helpful. And you can tell people about the channel. Hey, anybody out there who's listening on a podcast, you can rate the podcast too. That would be super helpful. So with that said, I really enjoyed this all the questions. Thank you so much. I hope it brings a lot of value to everyone out there. And I'll see you back soon. Until next time, ciao, ciao.